Ever feel like, lunchtime in high school, it was like its own Hunger Games almost.
Oh, absolutely.
Pushing the shoving. Now imagine that chaos, but in a Chinese high school. And instead of just, pizza and mystery meat, it's like 2 edible dishes are the prize.
Wow.
That's the scene we're diving into today, right? With the only one.
Okay.
We're following these 2 students, Sheng Wang and Jiang Tian, kind of thrown together in this blended family situation and trying to navigate this pressure cooker of a school.
And it's so interesting how the author uses the cafeteria, right,
Yeah.
as this microcosm for all these larger societal pressures, especially in the context of China.
Totally. The book actually describes the first-year students piling into this cafeteria like hungry wolves, moving like a mudslide.
Wow.
It's not just walking to get food, it's like a fight for survival.
Yeah, and it really highlights how central food is to Chinese culture, but also like the scarcity of it, especially good food, right?
Yeah.
Like you're already a student, you're stressed about exams, grades, and then on top of that, you got to fight for a decent meal. It's a lot.
It adds a whole other level. And
Yeah.
the stakes are high even outside the cafeteria. Remember Gao Tianyang and his little comment about first years running faster than dogs?
Oh, yes.
Lands him a punishment of copying essays?
It's wild, right? Like this tiny little comment, it seems so minor, but it speaks volumes about like the strictness, the discipline. That's just ingrained in the Chinese education system.
It makes you realize that even the smallest slip-up can have these, like, big consequences.
Totally.
So you have this backdrop of intense competition, academic pressure, and then we meet Jiang Tian, who makes, well, let's just say an interesting choice.
Okay.
He decides to stay behind and correct his physics exam during the lunch rush. What would you do?
See, and that's what I find so fascinating, right? Like this isn't just about like him being a stickler for the rules.
Yeah.
It speaks to this deeply ingrained cultural emphasis on academic achievement.
Yeah.
Like he's surrounded by all this chaos, people scrambling for food, and he's worried about correcting minor errors. It shows you how deep that mindset runs.
It's like he's wired differently almost.
Totally.
Oblivious to the social dynamics. Or maybe he just doesn't care. I don't know.
And even his teacher, Zhao Kai, right, is surprised by this. So it's not just like, oh, that's Jiang Tian being Jiang Tian. It really goes against their whole school culture.
It's a statement.
Yeah.
And then instead of heading to this crazy cafeteria, he takes Sheng Wang on a detour
Okay.
to a rundown convenience store called, of all things, Joy.
Joy? Interesting.
It's described as this quirky little place with like a knockoff vibe, run by this guy, Boss Zhao, and a mute man who helps him.
I found myself wondering, reading that, like, is Joy this known haven for certain students?
Right.
Like, is it the place you go to escape all that pressure from school? I don't know.
It's like stepping into a different world, almost. Completely separate from all the strictness and the rules of the school.
Totally.
And the mute man just adds this whole other layer of intrigue, You start thinking about all the people who move through that world unseen, unheard, like silent observers in this whole crazy dance of adolescence.
I like that, yeah.
But before we can even unpack the mystery of the mute man,
Right.
we have another twist. Just as Sheng Wang's kind of starting to relax a little, Jiang Tian just leaves him at the store.
What?
Abruptly, doesn't say where he's going, nothing, just walks out. Seriously, what was that? It's almost like he's playing some kind of game, right?
It is interesting, isn't it?
Leaving Sheng Wang stranded like that, no explanation, nothing.
It makes you wonder, is it a power move? Is he doing this intentionally? Or is it, is he just completely clueless?
Right.
Because we see those moments with Jiang Tian where you're not quite sure if he's being calculated or just completely oblivious.
And their history makes it even more complicated, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Like, you think about everything they've been through.
Throwing the free lunch situation on top of it just adds,
Oh, don't even get me started on that. Talk about adding insult to injury.
Seriously.
Yeah.
You've got Sheng Wang stuck in this, rundown store. The clock is ticking, and he's got no way out.
He is completely out of his element. You can practically feel his anxiety, can't you?
Oh, totally. You just know this isn't going to end well. It's like the author wants us to squirm a little.
A little. I was on the edge of my seat. But it's interesting, though, that Ba Zhao, he calls Jiang Tian to deal with the situation.
See, and that's the turning point for me. Because whether he means to or not, Jiang Tian, he has a certain power in this situation.
It's his fault they're even there.
Exactly. So even though he walks out, He's still kind of pulling the strings, you know?
It's like this weird sense of responsibility that he maybe doesn't even realize he has.
Right, exactly. Like, is he aware of the position he's putting Sheng Wang in? It's tough to say.
This whole scene, it really lays bare the contrast between them, doesn't it?
Oh, 100%.
You've got Jiang Tian, who's just like unflappable, like nothing phases him.
Ice cold.
And then there's Sheng Wang, who is just completely flustered and out of his depth.
And the author reinforces that through their physical descriptions, too. Like, remember how Jiang Tian is described as like a walking popsicle?
Yeah, yeah.
Totally unfazed by the heat, while Sheng Wang is practically drowning in sweat.
Oh my gosh, yes. It's like those physical descriptions are visual metaphors for what's going on inside.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It emphasizes the distance between them, both literally and figuratively.
And it just makes you wonder if this whole free lunch mess, as uncomfortable as it is, could this be the thing that changes their dynamic?
Right. It's like they say adversity brings people together.
Sometime.
Could this be that moment for them? And let's not forget, this whole free lunch thing, it's just one tiny piece of the puzzle here.
Oh, right. We're dealing with the whole system, aren't we?
Exactly. They're navigating these complex relationships within a system that's all about conformity and success. It's intense.
So those little moments of rebellion, like sneaking off to joy, they take on this whole other meaning.
100%.
They're trying to find a little breathing room, right?
Yeah,
like a crack in the pavement where something real can actually, grow.
It's like they need that space where they can just like exhale. You know?
Totally.
And who knows, maybe joy is that space for them.
Maybe.
With its like mismatched furniture and, that air of secrecy.
And Boss Zhao and the mute man.
Right, exactly. Like it's so far removed from the pressures of school, maybe that's where they can just be.
It's funny you should say that because as much as like Jiang Tian's actions just seem so, I don't know, kind of callous in this part, there's this like underlying tension that makes me wonder if maybe, just maybe, this whole thing could be the start of something different for them.
It's a good observation because the author really goes out of their way to like highlight the awkwardness between them.
Oh, totally.
Their personalities, they're like night and day, right?
Oil and water, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's almost like this free lunch fiasco. It just throws all those differences into even sharper relief.
And through it all, you've got the mute man,
right?
This silent observer to their like teenage drama.
What do we make of him?
I don't know. What do you think his role is in all of this?
He's a mystery, isn't he? A silent presence in this world of like, miscommunication.
Yes.
Unspoken words. It makes you think about all the different ways we communicate, right?
Right.
Like sometimes the most powerful messages are the ones that are never actually spoken out loud.
Oh, that's good.
Right. Like what is the mute man saying through his silence? It's really interesting to think about.
It's like he represents a different kind of understanding almost,
Oh, yeah.
Like a quiet kind of wisdom that you don't find within the walls of that school.
I love that interpretation.
Oh, like he's outside of that whole system.
100%. It reminds us that there's so many different ways of seeing the world, right?
Absolutely.
And experiencing it. Like the mute man, he's experiencing this whole free lunch drama, but from a completely different perspective.
This deep dive has been quite the journey, hasn't it?
It really has.
We started with like this chaotic cafeteria scene, and here we are talking about the complexities of communication and like the search for something real.
It just goes to show you, even in the most ordinary places, human connection, it always finds a way, right?
Yeah, it does.
Like we all crave that connection, that sense of belonging, even when it's messy, even when it's complicated.
Absolutely.
It's what makes us human.
It makes you think about those little moments in your own life, right? The chance encounters, the unexpected friendships, the people you find yourself connecting with, even when it seems like you have nothing in common.
Totally. And sometimes those unexpected connections, they become the most important ones.
The ones you never see coming.
Exactly. So yeah, next time you're feeling a little lost, take a look around. You never know who you might find.
And who knows? Maybe all it takes is a shared meal to spark that connection, even a free one.
Well said. Food, friendship, and a little bit of chaos. That's what it's all about.
That's life.
That's life.